first, if you could just introduce yourself to the podcast and give the viewers a brief background of your career.
Yeah, I'm retiring now at about 60 years old. I had around a 37-year career doing various things, best known for being an author and screenwriter. Um, I started out at Blen and A&M College, spent 2 years there before switching over to ACC for a semester and then transferring to Texas State to get a degree in uh, digital media for college, and then did an entry level job for a couple of years, and then was an advertiser for Food Network for a few years before releasing my first books, and then later on becoming a director.
What major obstacle or failure in your career forced you to evolve your storytelling approach, and how can we see that growth reflected in your subsequent work across both writing and film?
Yeah, so I think there's probably one good example is just some of the trials and tribulations I came against at Blend, my first 2 years of college. I had a bit of a rocky start as far as like getting into academics and really, finding my my path. And I think after transitioning to ACC, then Texas State, it really helped me like gain perspective on like what kind of realm I wanted to get into, which I think ultimately led me to my path where I am now. And I think that was a tough spot to really try and think of, hey, what do I actually want to do with my career, and like what kind of things was I interested in. And I knew I was interested in writing and creativity, so I think that was a big obstacle to overcome, just to sort of figure that out and find the right place to be successful.
You've worked extensively in both original writing and visual storytelling. When you adapt written work to film, whether your own or others, what do you see as the most crucial elements to preserve versus what needs to change for the screen?
Yeah, I think it made it very easy because my first um, film adaptation was of my own novel, which lucky I got the opportunity to do that because it really made me realize, what things I wanted to keep as the author. And I think that made it more helpful trying to transition it into the movie because I could make the decisions on what to cut and things. And I think that's helped just from an author's perspective when adapting other things that I went on to as well. So, yeah.
Among all your novels and films, which single project do you feel represents the pinnacle of your creative achievement, and what made that particular work feel like everything came together perfectly?
Yeah, I think it would definitely have to be my first novel I released while I was at a different job of doing advertising. It was my first, piece of creative content that I had ever, really released in an official capacity. And I think once I realized that got some good feedback that I could do this and it was a thing I could, continue to do, and that I had that ability for that. So I think that was a huge obstacle I overcame.
Writing is often a solitary endeavor, while directing requires managing large teams. How do you navigate between these very different creative environments, and which feels more natural to you?
Yeah, so I think this is interesting because I do feel like I have both of those sides to my personality as far as solitary versus kind of interacting with others. I think the solitary part comes very natural, like naturally just to focus and write. I just have to kind of be alone and go through that process on my own. But I do think I very much enjoy collaboration and get bouncing ideas off other people, and trying to express to them what I'm envisioning and stuff. So I think that's something I really bring to managing other people and directing and whatnot, and just trying to make sure I'm checking in with people and just trying to do my best to know what's going on with each person within a set so I can find some success.
What was the most significant professional or creative obstacle you faced in your career, and how did overcoming it or learning to work with it fundamentally change how you approach your craft?
Yeah, so I would say this is probably around the time before I got my second job as an advertiser, right after I had like an entry-level job for about 2 years. I was really kind of struggling finding a new job and was really not sure what my path was at this point. I was kind of doubting myself and was like, did I go into the wrong field? Where can I go from here? And then I just was like, you know what, I'm just going to start writing. And so I did. And I really had some struggles with it at first. I started writing some screenplays and some early chapters of a book, and I just didn't get good feedback, and I ended up sending one to some editors, and they didn't like it, told me to work on it some more, send them something different next time. And I think going through that really made me a better writer when I did end up finding a good final product in that first novel.
What's one piece of technical or creative advice you wish you'd known at the beginning of your career, and what's something you're still learning or working to improve?
I think just starting, like, one of the big things with being creative is I think it's really easy to get in your head and think, you have to have all these things happen and there's all this pressure to what's going to happen in your story and how you want it to be. And I think one thing is just, realizing that not everything you write down is going to be amazing, and that you're just going to have to keep working on it, and that you'll just learn as you kind of do it, even though it's a scary thing to start. And then I think as far as one thing I'm still working on is just I think it's tough with finding the right score for movies, because I'm one of those people who really likes to put in popular songs, and I've started to drift away from that in some of my later films, because I felt like I was relying too much on the soundtrack to carry out certain vibes that can be established through characters and simpler soundtracks and things like that. So
as you've witnessed decades of transformation in publishing and filmmaking, which of your career highlights feels most significant precisely because of how it responded to or anticipated those industry shifts?
Yeah, so I think right before I really got started with writing, or no, actually before I got started with directing, I had been writing these novels, and I was always a big movie person, and I knew that during that time there was a big shift in movies where where adaptations were more popular because they were something people already knew and were attached to, and could make money at the box office without having the chance of like not being seen by people because they don't know what kind of new story is coming out. So I think I got lucky with having the opportunity to direct something that was my own work that was already popular with people, because it meant more commercial success for my films.
Who was the most influential mentor or creative guide in your life, and what specific lesson or perspective they shared continues to shape how you work today?
This is funny because I actually, one of the people who influenced me the most was probably like Jim Cameron and James Gunn. Both of those are big movie directors. I think both of them, I really, started to follow them after hearing about them on a podcast like we're on now, with Jason Bateman and his actor buddies. Once I just hear about like the kind of people they are and what kind of things they think about when they're trying to come up with this stuff, and you know, what kind of things they're interested in. I just remember really connecting with that and you know, learning a lot from them as I followed their careers.
If someone discovers your work 50 years from now, having never heard of you before, what would you want that first encounter with your storytelling to reveal about who you were as an artist and what you believed was important?
I think mainly that just you know, my works had a positive effect on people's life, whether that's the message of it or just bringing them joy. I just think the most important thing out of, you know, creating content is just creating enjoyment for people and just, you know, making their life that little bit better in that sort of way. So that's something I've tried to convey through all my works.